Good afternoon YouTube, it's Warbles on a lot here, and today I'm going to talk about something that's going to be a good news story, because I'm going to tell you why you don't have to worry about chemtrails, because they are a paranoid figment of a deranged Imaginitis. And I'm aware that that may not be the way you're used to thinking about chemtrails. You might have been worried about them, but I've got to say to you, we are here looking west, alright? I'm 3,500 feet above sea level. This gatepost right here is 1,110 metres above sea level, right? So I've got a big sky. I look at the big sky all the time. I'm a time expired aeroplane freak, and I understand what is in the sky and what makes it look the way it looks. Okay? I'm underneath the corridor that the regular public transport airliners use to get from Sydney to Brisbane. I also get to watch people going from Tamworth and Bathurst to the Gold Coast. Alright, so yes, I see condensation trails in the sky. And I know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the result of air which has water vapour contained within it as part of the relative humidity of the air. And the relative humidity of the air is pretty close to condensation point, but there's not quite enough water in the air for the vapour to condense and become droplets which the light can bounce off. Water vapour is absolutely clear, right? You can't see it. When the air goes into the engine, it is mixed with hydrocarbon fuel. Now the carbon connects onto the oxygen and comes out as either carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide, and the water connects onto the oxygen, the hydrogen connects onto the oxygen, 2 hydrogens to every oxygen, and it comes out as water vapour, right? If the air was relatively humid enough that it was almost on the point of creating a cloud, and you fly through it in a petrochemical burning engine powered aeroplane, what's going to come out of your exhaust is air that can no longer hold the water vapour. So as soon as it cools down, once it gets a few feet away from the engine exhaust pipe, the orifice, that water will condense into droplets, and you'll be able to see a cloud of steam emerging from the engine. Now during the Second World War, people who were living on the ground in Europe used to quite regularly look up and see vast condensation trails from hundreds of bombers being attacked by condensation trails from tens of fighters, because that was the size groups they used to fly in. And nobody thought they were being sprayed with chemicals, okay? After the war, there weren't that many aeroplanes, and it wasn't really until jet airline travel came about that you started to see fairly regular contrails, because the jets flew higher. Okay, and as global warming kicks off, the air is warmer, and the warmer the air is, the more moisture it can carry. So now in 2012 there are more days where there is more moisture in the warmer air, and the clouds form behind the aeroplanes much more often. And because jet fuel is untaxed, so your motor car fuel is subsidising the airline industry to take painted secretaries to Bali on a clap catching expedition for their holidays once a year, or motor mechanics to go skiing at Aspen, right? And there are more aeroplanes flying, even after the global financial crisis. And these aeroplanes are making more and more and more condensation trails, okay? And because the people my age and 10 or 20 years older have spent 30 or 40 years locked up in a brick box looking at their desk to worry about money, they haven't been looking at the sky. And after going to school and seeing nearly no condensation in the trails behind the aeroplanes, they come out and find the sky's full of bloody aeroplanes, and nearly every one of them's dragging a condensation trail, and they're a bit paranoid. They've heard of global warming and they don't want to believe in it, and they think maybe there's somebody somewhere who's poisoning the sky with chemicals injected into the hairy go-plane exhausts. And these people believe it. Here we have my favourite conspiracy magazine. It's printed in New Zealand and it's called Uncensored. And they take great pride in printing pretty much any rave. And they like photoshopped pictures that look pretty scary. Like this one of a jumbo jet with a skull for a cockpit and 4 skulls for engine inlets. And they also have no drama printing a picture like this, which basically shows ice crystals forming in the sky and being chopped around by the winds as one air mass mixes with another air mass, and one air mass is slightly warmer and slightly moister, and the other air mass is freezing cold, and the cold air mass chills the warmer air mass, and condensation forms and freezes and becomes ice crystals. And being ice crystals, sometimes they're all kinds of lovely colours, especially if the sun's going down behind them. And if you've got Australia, for the sunlight to bounce off all the dust in the air, because our farmers are putting all our topsoil onto the tops of the New Zealand mountains, except for the stuff that's going into the ocean and filling up the rivers. Now these are absolutely stock standard normal condensation trails forming behind airliners flying from one city to the other. The reason they're in parallel is because there's usually 2 or 3 airliners who all want to take off at the same time on the same day, and they fly one behind the other, slightly offset, for collision avoidance. Alright? Now, I mentioned that petroleum fuel is carbon and hydrogen, right? That's methane. Okay? This stuff here is N-heptane, it's C7H16, right? You get the energy from burning the hydrogen. You've heard about octane ratings for petrol. Well, this is pure isooctane, otherwise known as 2,2,4-trimethylpentane, or C8H18. Right? This is benzene, C6H6. Right? And kerosene would come in down here, and it's got even more hydrogen on it, is my guess, because kerosene is more energy dense than petrol, and pure isooctane is the best petrol you can get. Now, you know that oil floats on water? Well, so does petrol. American gallons are smaller than English gallons, so therefore petrol is 7.2 to 7.6 pounds per gallon. Kerosene is heavier than petrol, so it's 7.5 to 7.8 pounds per gallon. Water is 10 pounds per Imperial British gallon. Now, I don't have a jet engine handy that I can demonstrate for you. What I've got is a piston engine in my Subaru 4-wheel drive solar electric fire chariot. Here we see the marvel of Japanese manufacturing technology, which sucks air in here and blows away exhaust gases here, and in between the inlet and the exhaust we have this engine which mixes 98 octane petrol with the air that goes into this air cleaner to burn in a fireplace, which is a 1.8 litre swept cylinder displacement engine. Now these are 1 litre milk cartons, so let's just say for the purposes of illustration that it's 900 mils up to that blue line. Okay? So that's roughly the capacity of the fireplace in the engine in my car. And every time this engine turns over once, it sucks in 0.9 of a litre of air. So let's just see what happens when we start the thing. Okay, so I've adjusted the choke. It's turning over 1,000 times per minute, so it's sucking 900 litres of air into the engine. I don't know, maybe you can even hear the air getting sucked in. You can certainly hear the exhaust coming out. So that's what the exhaust looks like straight after engine start. At 25 minutes to 7. 24.5 minutes to 7. We come back to the exhaust and look what's happening here. We're starting to get water. coming out of the exhaust. This is because my exhaust pipe is cold, and the cold exhaust pipe is condensing the water droplets that are in the exhaust gas, and it's cooling down, and I'm now blowing condensation out of the car. It's why you can now see visible exhaust. All right? Water in the exhaust of a piston engine which is burning 98 octane petrol. Not a bad little demonstration, is it? Okay, now that's what's going on behind every jet engine that you ever saw in the sky. Only they burn vast shit pots more fuel than I do in this thing. Now, here we see, I'm just adjusting the choke down to 1,100 revs per minute. So you want to know how much air is going in that little hole? Well, this water tank behind me, constructed from a time expired water bed found at the dump. It's a 1,000 litre water tank, alright? A metre by a metre by a metre enclosed. That's 1,000 litres, right? Now that is how much air is getting sucked in and burnt in the fireplace in my Subaru car, alright? That's 1 minute at idle. Cool? If I'm going up the highway at 100 kilometres an hour, I'm pulling 3,000 revs a minute. So there's 3 of these per minute. Going in cold, coming out hot, burnt, with water added to it. Okay, so it's now been running for 4 minutes. And now there's still some water coming out, but what's going on is the metal in the exhaust system is heating up, and it's keeping the gas hot enough that it doesn't drop its water until it's well clear of the engine, right? Just remember that, 1,000 litres per minute at idle. Up the highway, 3,000 litres a minute, sucked in, burnt and spat out. Now, here is a piston engined German bomber from the Second World War. Fuel tank, fuel tank, fuel tank. Bomb bay. Empty fuselage, got to be kept that way for centre of gravity issues. Crew compartment. Engines. See how packed the engine nacelle is with the wheel folded back into it? So you can't use a World War II bomber to spray your chemicals. Post-World War II ground attack aircraft. There behind the pilot, that's the fuel tank. Right, for a 3,500 horsepower piston engine. There's nowhere on the thing that you can fit chemical tanks. A 1950s vintage turboprop aeroplane. From here to here to here is fuel. A 1950s jet. The entire wing is full of fuel, with a wingtip tank added on. The body is full of passengers. Once again, the entire wing is full of fuel. 111 passengers. 6,000 gallons of fuel, 60,000 pounds, 1,800 miles. There is nowhere on the aeroplane to fit the chemicals to create the alleged chemtrails. It's a crock of shit. Forget it. Bye. It's all bullshit.